Daniel had only been in New York for 3 months. But already, the city had started to mold him. Not in the obvious ways. His accent remained intact. His Buenos Aires rhythm still laced his speech, but in the subtler rewiring of how he walked into rooms. There was more calculation in his pauses, more restraint in his smiles. His eyes, naturally warm, had learned the art of neutrality. MBA programs taught you frameworks, Manhattan taught you masks. The startup he joined was less like a company and more like a curated ecosystem of obsession. Hayward Capital was lean, agile, and loud about its disruption. Finance, but make it sexy, and at the heart of its pitch deck brilliance and hyper-polished brand language were 2 names, Charles Hayward, the stoic tech whisperer with a background in quantitative modeling, and Natalie Hayward, the public face, former broadcast producer turned PR magician. Charles rarely spoke unless it mattered. He was the kind of man who wore silence like others wore wristwatches, expensive, intentional, and a signal to those who understood. His sharp British suits and minimalist office made him feel more like a gallery piece than a CEO. But everyone knew, if he called your name, you paid attention. Natalie, on the other hand, moved like sunlight through glass. She entered spaces in tones of cream and navy, high heels that never hurried, hair always a soft frame for a face that had long ago mastered elegance. When she laughed, people felt included. When she frowned, whole rooms shifted. The first time Daniel saw her, it wasn't in a meeting or office. It was at a quarterly pitch presentation, where she stood next to the screen like a conductor. Her voice was low, textured. She described market segmentation like it was foreplay. Daniel watched her, fascinated, not attracted, not then, just fascinated by how much power a single person could exert without raising her voice. 2 weeks later, he was assigned to assist her on a multi-phase brand outreach strategy. It was positioned as a mentorship. But the truth was simpler. She needed someone with both fluency in design language and the ability to write compelling copy. Daniel was fluent in both. Their first meeting was in her glass-walled corner office, with the skylines stitched across the windows like embroidery. "Daniel," she said, not looking up from her iPad. "Argentina, right? Buenos Aires?" He nodded. "Yes. You write like an American. But you speak like someone who reads poetry." He laughed. It wasn't flirtatious, but it wasn't sterile either. She looked at him then. Fully. "You might be wasted as an assistant." It wasn't a compliment. It was a challenge. Daniel felt it lodge somewhere in his chest. Their work rhythm settled into late nights and early texts. At first, always about deliverables, data points, client preferences. Then, after hours, she'd send him screenshots of brand failures. "Don't ever let me catch you using this shade of blue." Or snippets of quotes from obscure designers. "This is why aesthetic is politics." It wasn't until the investor dinner that something changed. She arrived late, wearing a black silk gown that made everyone else at the table look underdressed. Charles wasn't there. Delayed flight. Someone muttered. Daniel had been seated 2 chairs down. But she asked him to switch with someone. So he was suddenly next to her. "What do you think of them?" she whispered during the appetizers. He tilted his head. "The investors." He gave a half smile. "They seem more interested in your dress than your pitch." She laughed. "A short, real one. Don't flatter me, Daniel. It makes you sound young." After dessert, she leaned closer and murmured, "You have presence. Not confidence yet, but presence. That's rarer." That night, past midnight, he got a Slack notification. "Natalie, direct message, dinner was dull without you at the end. If you were there, I might have stayed longer." He stared at it for minutes, crafted his response, deleted it, then replied, "Next time, sit me closer from the start." She read it instantly. No reply. The next day, she was back to her usual tone in meetings, crisp, focused, slightly impatient. But something shifted in Daniel. It wasn't desire, not exactly. It was awareness, of how close she stood behind him while reading edits, of how often her fingers brushed the table beside his laptop. of how her compliments had undertones he hadn't recognized before. At the end of that week, during a brand audit presentation, Natalie publicly praised Daniel's contributions. His instinct for tone is unnerving. I almost don't need to edit him. When the meeting ended, and everyone was leaving, she stayed back a moment, eyes on her laptop. Not him, she said. You have leadership potential, Daniel, more than some of the people above you. He didn't know what to say, so he said thank you. She looked up, her eyes held his for 3 seconds too long. And that night, while walking back to his apartment, Daniel thought, I thought I was just getting promoted, not propositioned. The invitation arrived as a casual aside at the end of a long day. Natalie mentioned it while adjusting her coat in the hallway, a private networking mixer hosted at the penthouse suite of an investor known for his eccentric tastes and bottomless wine cellar. You should come, she said, not looking at him. Charles is in Boston. I hate these things alone. Daniel hesitated, unsure if the invitation was professional, social, or something that didn't have a category yet. There was a pause between him, not long, but charged. She didn't smile when she said it, but her voice carried a thread of something unspoken, something meant only for him to interpret. But he went. Of course he went. The penthouse in Tribeca was all chrome and crystal, dim lights and murmured deals. Daniel wore the same suit he'd worn to 3 interviews. It didn't matter. The moment Natalie saw him walk through the door, she smiled like she'd won something. There was approval in her eyes, not of what he wore, but of the fact that he came, that he chose her invitation over whatever other obligations might have waited. They floated between conversations, her hand occasionally on his arm, not possessive, not flirtatious, just anchoring, like a signal. This one's with me. It was subtle but not unintentional. Daniel could feel the room noting it. Men glanced, women evaluated, nobody said anything, but the current shifted wherever they stood. Charles didn't show, something about a board meeting running late. Or maybe that was just the narrative crafted to justify the symmetry of the evening. Later, the crowd thinned, the lights dimmed, someone played Coltrane, and on the balcony, with the Hudson glittering like broken glass beneath them, Natalie offered him a glass of Sancerre and said, You have everything it takes. But power doesn't wait for permission. The way she said it, it wasn't advice. It was a dare. Daniel didn't answer. He looked at her, the slope of her collarbone, the way the wind toyed with her hair, and felt something pull taut between them. It wasn't desire alone, it was a recognition of something shared, hunger, carefully masked by civility. Inside the suite, the air was warmer, the silence thicker, music drifted through rooms now mostly empty. She didn't ask, he didn't resist. Their kiss was soft at first, exploratory, then urgent, like something damned too long. They moved as if choreographed, not frantic but inevitable. The world outside narrowed to skin, breath, fabric falling. There was a tenderness to how she touched him, but it wasn't romantic. It was something between possession and performance. Daniel felt himself slipping, not into love, but into a role, one she had cast for him. They didn't speak much. There was no need. Whatever they were doing wasn't about words. Daniel woke before dawn, tangled in sheets that weren't his. Light from the window etching Natalie's silhouette into memory. But she was gone. On the marble counter sat a folder. Cream linen, embossed with the Hayward Capital seal. Inside were pitch drafts, financial projections, and something else, an outline of Charles's upcoming proprietary investment model. No note, just the folder. Daniel stared at it for a long time. The edges of the pages felt too crisp, too deliberate. Was this carelessness, or was it bait? He closed it slowly, like a door he wasn't sure he wanted to walk through, but already had. And it struck him, with a cold clarity, that maybe this wasn't a gift. Maybe it was a test. He dressed, tied the same tie, looked at himself in the mirror and didn't fully recognize the man adjusting his collar. As he walked out, he told himself it was just strategy, just timing, nothing more, but something inside whispered, it wasn't just about being chosen. It was about what you chose to do once you were. And Daniel had made his move. The apartment was tucked away on the border of Soho and Nolita. A narrow stairwell above a cafe that smelled perpetually of burnt espresso and regret. It wasn't luxurious, at least not in the obvious way, but it was private. Anonymous. They called it the boardroom, half-jokingly, and only in whispers. Daniel always arrived first. He liked the stillness before she appeared, the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the faint hum of the city pressing against the windows. He would open his laptop, pretend to review pitch decks. But really, he was rehearsing, his face, his words, his role. Natalie always arrived wearing sunglasses. Even at night, she'd toss her coat over the same chair, unbuckle her heels like she owned the floor beneath them, and kiss him, not warmly, not cruelly, just efficiently, like resetting a watch. After that, it was wine, talk, and whatever followed. They saw each other twice a week, sometimes 3, no schedule, no texts during the day. Everything existed in a pocket dimension where they weren't themselves, where she wasn't Natalie Hayward, wife of Charles, and he wasn't the intern turned analyst with perfect teeth and a sharpened resume. One night, Natalie lay with her head on his chest, eyes tracing the lines of light across the ceiling. He used to notice everything. She murmured, the way I changed perfume, the cut of a new dress. Now, he notices market shifts, profit margins. Daniel didn't respond. He knew silence invited more truth than questions ever could. He doesn't cheat, she continued, not with people, anyway. He cheats with ambition. It's like I'm married to a ghost who still pays the bills. Daniel didn't touch her hair, though he wanted to. Instead, he asked quietly, do you ever think about leaving? She turned to face him, eyes narrowing with something unreadable. And go where? Power is a prison, too, just with nicer wallpaper. That night, after she fell asleep, Daniel slid out of bed and opened his laptop. He started outlining a strategy deck, something lean, disruptive, built on gaps he'd identified from conversations with Natalie. The Hayward investment model had blind spots. He knew them now, because she had shown him, piece by intimate piece. He began taking notes, not on his laptop, but in a small, black notebook. He labeled entries by date, client, detail. Natalie never questioned it at first. She thought it was charming. Until one night, she found the notebook. She was looking for her phone. The notebook was half hidden under the mattress. Pages curled from use. What's this? She asked, holding it up. Daniel's breath hitched. Just ideas. Notes. I like to remember things, you know. Reflections. She flipped through a few pages. Her name appeared. So did Charles's. So did numbers. You document me? She asked, voice low. He nodded, slowly, only the good parts. There was a silence so thick it felt sentient. Then, she laughed. It wasn't joy or humor. It was something closer to recognition. You really are something, Daniel. And she kissed him, long and deep, as if the acknowledgement only deepened her hold. After she left that night, Daniel messaged a contact at a boutique VC firm in Brooklyn. Attached was a proposal, just a teaser, no names, no direct figures, but enough to spark interest. Their reply was immediate, let's talk. Over lunch, and if possible, keep that connection open. The wife, she may be your best pipeline. Daniel sat alone in the boardroom apartment, the wine untouched, his phone still glowing. For the first time, he didn't feel flattered, he felt useful. He told himself this was just business, just leveraging what he'd learned. But he also knew what Natalie didn't, that love was a currency. And trust, when spent carelessly, was debt. The game was no longer a seduction. It was a transaction, and he was winning. At least, for now. The email landed in Charles Hayward's inbox at 4:03 a.m. No subject line, just a single line of text and an attachment. You should know what your house is built on. From someone who used to believe. He opened the file. What stared back at him was a near-perfect replica of Hayward Capital's upcoming proprietary investment model, one that had been developed over the last 8 months in high-level meetings. Sealed rooms, and password-protected drives. Charles didn't slam his laptop. He didn't call for a meeting. He just sat there in the dim blue glow, rereading the line, not out of disbelief, but calculation. At 8 a.m. sharp, he walked into the IT floor and instructed the CTO to pull all server logs for the past 90 days. He wanted every remote access, every midnight login, every data export tracked and color-coded. The list came in that evening. One line glowed like a vein in a corpse. 3:12 a.m. Internal file accessed. IP origin. Natalie Haywood's home office account. Charles didn't confront her that night. He waited. 2 days later, he came home early, found her in the kitchen, slicing pomegranate, the blade sticky with red. "We need to talk," he said, calm, cold. She turned. "About what?" "The file, the model, the access." Natalie didn't ask how he knew. She sat down, slowly, pomegranate juice smudged her thumb. Her voice was barely audible. "I gave it to him. He didn't steal it. I gave it." Charles looked at her the way one might look at a fire long after it has consumed everything, more ash than anger. "Why?" Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't cry. "Because he listened. Because you didn't. Because I wanted to matter to someone." Charles nodded once, then walked away. 2 hours later, Daniel received an official email from Haywood Capital's legal department. Subject: Notice of civil litigation and violation of intellectual property rights. 3 days later, he was served court papers. Asset freeze, NDA breach, intent to sue. By Friday, his name had been quietly blacklisted from every major hiring pool in New York finance. Natalie, she vanished from work. The office whispered, first about the affair, then about the data breach, then about the woman who had too much wine at the Lydian hotel bar. Climbed 21 stories, and stared over the edge. She didn't jump. Someone called security, but the rumor ran faster than the truth. Charles never issued a statement. He simply appointed a new brand director and diverted Natalie's responsibilities to a task force. Daniel sat in his apartment, stripped of credentials, of contacts, of leverage. The folder, the one Natalie had once left on the counter, still sat in his drawer. Untouched. He opened it one last time. Not to use it, to remind himself what betrayal looks like on paper. He told himself he never asked for it, that it was left there, given, but the law didn't care about intent. And neither, now, did anyone else. Buenos Aires wasn't where Daniel pictured his story ending. But stories don't ask where you want him to close. They just do. He had returned 6 weeks after the litigation had quietly strangled his future in New York. No trial, no press, just silence. His name removed from shortlists. Calls that stopped being returned. And one last handshake from a lawyer who said, "You'll want to keep things quiet. That's the best deal you're getting." So he disappeared. The apartment in Palermo was modest. Sunlight streamed in through the slatted windows like forgiveness he hadn't earned. He worked as a financial consultant under a pseudonym. Mostly remote projects for companies too small to care about pedigree. His only real interaction was with the grocer downstairs, who always gave him one extra egg for free, never asking why his Spanish had the cadence of someone who'd lived too long in English. Daniel never reached out to anyone from New York. No friends, no colleagues, certainly not Natalie. His phone remained factory reset, tucked away in a drawer he never opened. He told himself that meant he was moving on. Until one evening, while reviewing spreadsheets for a logistics startup in Patagonia, a new message appeared in his inbox. The sender was untraceable. No name, no profile photo, just a subject line. "I never hated you, just hated that I mattered so little." There was no body text, no attachments, just that one sentence. Daniel closed the laptop, stared at the darkened screen until his own reflection blurred. That night, he opened the drawer. The old black notebook was still there. Its pages curled and yellowed slightly at the edges. The ink smudged from months of fingerprints and meaning. He flipped through it, not reading, just touching each page like a rosary. Every entry a memory, a decision, a transaction dressed up as intimacy. He almost tore it. Instead, he lit a match. In the kitchen sink, the flames moved quickly. Names dissolved. Numbers evaporated. Her handwriting disappeared beneath the orange tongues of heat. When it was done, he turned on the faucet. Watched the ashes swirl down the drain like gray confessions. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. Just stood there until the metal cooled under his fingertips. Later, brushing his teeth, he looked into the mirror. His face had hardened in places he hadn't noticed. There was a stillness in his eyes that didn't used to be there. Not resignation, not peace, just absence. He whispered to his reflection. Was it ever real? Or just another pitch? The mirror didn't answer. No one ever did. And somewhere in the city, a woman with graying eyes and flawless posture might still wonder if silence meant safety, or just distance. But Daniel understood now. He hadn't been chosen. He had been useful. And when use ran out, so did everything else. He thought he was playing the game. He didn't know. He was just the proof that even smart men lose when they fake love.